Mr. Warford updates. With Mr. Warford updates. With Mr. Warford updates. With Mr. Warford.
What's up? Welcome to Updates with Mr. Warford. This is for my AP Human Geography classes. We are talking about Unit 6, or we've already begun to talk about Unit 6, Urban Land Development Patterns and Processes, okay? So first off, urbanization is the process by which populations of cities grow, and this shift from rural living to urban living, an increase in the overall number of people living in cities worldwide, and then an increase in the percentage of given populations within countries moving into cities. All right, so moving forward today is we're going to talk about some different theories, some different urban city models throughout this unit. It's very like theory and model heavy, this unit, but before we dive into that, we got to know a few vocab terms. All right, so we're going to go forward today looking at a few vocab terms. So the objective is we want to distinguish the difference between rank size rule and primate cities and be able to synthesize conclusions about city distributions, why cities are located where they are and why people flock to one over the other. And we're going to learn these two words here in just a second. So before we get into these definitions, what are the basics of this thing called rank size rule? All right, so the largest city has the largest trade area, so fewer places rival it as a hub or hearth of trade. So as we go down this hierarchy of urban places, we see the largest city has the biggest draw. Medium-sized cities trade in smaller areas of commerce, scattered a little more throughout a given country. Small towns have things like grocery stores and other necessities, and we get into like villages or what are called hamlets. They may have like a cafe or a gas station, but we see a hierarchy of urban places in any given region of the earth. So rank size rule, what exactly is it? In a model urban hierarchy, the population of a city or town will be inversely proportional to its rank in the hierarchy. If you're like, Warford, what the heck does that mean? Basically, it means that there will be one largest city within a given region or country, and then as you study the other sizes of the different cities in that country, you'll see it pared down as far as the amount of population and the market areas available. So here's an example. If the largest city has 12 million people, the second largest city in a given country will have about 6 million. So that's about half the population of the largest city that's there. The third city will have about 4 million. That's about a third. The fourth city will have 3 million, so on and so forth. It's important to know that not all countries follow the rank size rule. It doesn't apply to all countries, but you'll see that some of them it very much does. A real-world example of the rank size rule in action would be India. And I apologize for my webcam cutting this off, but you'll see number 1, the biggest circle, that would represent the biggest city. Then you have about half of that. Here's the second city, the third, and then behind the webcam is the fourth and fifth. So not all countries follow the rank size rule, but you'll notice if you study world populations that some countries very much so do. All right, so the exact opposite of that is what's called a primate city. Some countries have one massive city that dwarfs all the others in their country. So a city that is supremely dominant in terms of population and access to markets compared to other places. So going forward this week, we're going to start, our first theory we're going to talk about is the central place theory. And it states that in any given region, there can only be one largest central city, which is surrounded by a series of smaller cities, towns, and hamlets. We're going to cover that later this week, but first we got to know two new terms. Threshold. The first is threshold. Threshold is just the size of population that's necessary for any service to exist and stay profitable. That means making money. So services with a very low threshold, things like a convenience store, a gas station, they can exist in very small central places. So think about any small town in America Maybe you grew up in a small town. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you've driven through one. You'll see commonly convenience stores, gas stations, fast food restaurants. Those are low threshold services. Now, high threshold services, on the other hand, require a higher population to remain profitable and existent. Okay, so things like hospitals, department stores, sports arenas, you need generally a larger population to keep those afloat and running. That's threshold. Now, range is the maximum distance a customer is willing to travel for a good or service. People will travel further distances for a high order service than a low order service. So here's an example. Someone would be willing to travel pretty far. Let's say they had some kind of heart condition and needed to have a very risky heart surgery. They would travel pretty far to get that surgery if it meant they could live a more comfortable life and possibly survive some kind of heart attack or something, right? They wouldn't travel as far to pick up fast food. So the range is pretty far for things like, finding the best doctor to help me improve my health. The range is not so far to pick up McDonald's because they're everywhere. You can throw a rock and hit a McDonald's in the United States. So range is the maximum distance a customer is willing to travel for a good or service. So what are we going to do with this today? What I want you to do, there's a Google form in Google Classroom that I want you to fill out today. The first step I want you to do is pick one of these countries on this list. It does not matter to me. You're going to pick one. And my webcam is cutting it off, but the last two say China and Indonesia. You can pick any one of these. Once you have picked a country, I want you to research what are the top 5 most populous cities in that country. Use the internet, use the Google machine, look up 5 cities in that country, the top 5 in population, and list their population data. Okay, so write it down somewhere, type it somewhere. You're going to put it in the Google form in just a second. Once you have the population data, the 5 most populated cities in that country, you're going to answer these questions on the Google form. Okay, so there is a Google form for you to type this stuff. So did your city follow the rank size rule, or was it a primate city? Number 2, why do you think these patterns existed? So make an educated inference. So think about DTM stages. Think about more developed versus less developed. Think industrialization. Is there a history of colonization or imperialism? Migration patterns. Make an inference. Third, we're going to make another inference. What are pros and cons of primate cities? And then 4, what are pros and cons of cities that follow the rank size rule? Okay, I want you to complete those questions in the provided Google form and finish that today by 11:59 p.m. I'm hoping that gives you a little extra time on your hands so you can work on the Unit 6 vocab and key questions. As always, if you need anything, feel free to reach out. I'm right here to help you. Appreciate you. Have a great day.